A fellow called Drop Dude John is being quite provocative here. He's saying, well, that's not what woke meant, though, is it? Unless you have a desire to be deplatformed. And it just goes on and on. I'm so tired of this issue and of people being so unbelievably provocative. The term woke originally emerged in the African American vernacular and was used to describe being awake or aware of social injustices, particularly racial inequality. The roots of woke can be traced back to the early 20th century African American discourse, but it gained broader cultural traction in the 21st century, especially after being polarized during the Black Lives Matter movement. The term first emerged in 1938 and seems to be a term that comes out of music, urging people to stay woke in the context of radical injustice in the US. By 2014 and 2015, and the rise of Black Lives Matter, the following high-profile cases of police brutality, such as in the deaths of Michael Brown and Eric Garner, the term to stay woke was used as a rallying cry to promote awareness of systemic racism. In the US, woke quickly became associated with a broader set of progressive values beyond just racial justice, including feminism, LGBTQ plus rights, and environmentalism. And however, although its meaning began to shift due to its appropriation by political and media actors, transforming it into a tool for division, particularly within right-wing discourse. Conservatives in the late 2010s began using woke as a pejorative term, accusing liberals of being overly sensitive, politically correct, or imposing their values on others. And this rebranding of the term served to mock progressive social justice initiatives, implying that wokeness equated to moral superiority, intolerance of differing views, and authoritarianism. So, in the United States, in American politics, woke has been at the center of a culture war, and the word is used by both sides, but with starkly differing connotations. So this is a problem where one word can have a variety of different meanings depending on who's using it. In left-wing progressive circles, woke remains a badge of honor, signifying someone's awareness of injustices like racism, sexism, homophobia, and it's often tied to movements like the Me Too movement, climate activism, and civil rights advocacy. In right-wing conservative circles, the term is weaponized, referring to perceived extremism in liberal causes. Politicians and media figures like Ron DeSantis, the Stop Woke Act, use it to criticize efforts related to diversity, equality and inclusion, or anti-racism training in schools and corporations. Conservatives argue that woke culture has gone too far, stifling free speech and enforcing groupthink. In 2018 to 2023, former US President Donald Trump and figures like Fox News' Tucker Carlson, he who, in diminutive version, had a little chat with Putin, or at least with one of Putin's doppelgangers, have frequently used woke to deride progressive policies, particularly around education, critical race theory debates, and so on. Media, corporate messaging, and more. Carlson once referred to woke capital as corporations adopting socially progressive stances to appeal to younger consumers. In Britain, woke in British discourse follows a similar trajectory, but with specific local nuances. And for this reason, I find it very difficult to define what woke is. I like to think that woke is simply a catch-all for kindness or for positivity, but it isn't, of course. UK politicians and commentators began using the term to critique left-wing identity politics, particularly concerning issues of race, gender, and history. In 2019, from that period, from Brexit onwards, the term gained political traction when conservative government individuals began focusing on so-called woke agendas or woke agendum in education and public policy. Somebody was complaining the other day about my use of Latin plurals and why I don't use Latin plural when it comes to alumni, because I think the word alumni is a ridiculous word. and I'd rather not use it except in its bland sense. I don't believe it has a genuine Latin root. A significant moment in the UK was the backlash to protests around statues tied to colonialism, and the Edward Colston statue in Bristol being toppled in 2020. The right wing decried this as an example of wokeism, rewriting history and undermining national pride. In 2020, Boris Johnson criticised the woke agenda around the tearing down of statues, calling it an attempt to edit our past. Of course, Johnson should have recognised. Is he talking about one woke agendum or many woke agenda? And that's the point, really. Johnson knows his Latin, and Johnson was well aware of this. In 2021, the Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, go Gavin, go, attacked the woke curriculum in schools, particularly with regard to how colonialism and British history were being taught, and colonialism was being denigrated, well, as it should be, really. Politically, the word has been co-opted in the UK by right-wing commentators to dismiss policies and social issues tied to identity politics, such as debates over trans rights, racism, historical revisionism. On the left, it remains a term of solidarity for those pushing for social justice reforms, though some on the left have also criticised the performative nature of wokeness in corporate or shallow gestures without meaningful change. So there are three political implications here. One, the cultural polarisation, where the term has exacerbated divides between left and right in both the US and the UK, often reducing nuanced discussions on race, gender and equality to simplistic binaries like woke versus anti-woke. Two, the policy backlash. In the UK, the anti-woke laws that have been passed, such as Florida's Stop Woke Act, limiting how race and identity can be discussed in schools and businesses. And in the UK, similar rhetoric is being used to challenge progressive initiatives, particularly in universities and in public institutions. This is this is that tribalism and that attempt to define a very vague nomenclature. Number three, the media and political strategy. In both the US and the UK, the right-wing media have utilised the term to galvanise conservative bases, presenting wokeness as a threat to traditional values and freedoms. So on the left, woke has sometimes been embraced, though there's an awareness of its limitations in achieving systemic change. So the problem here is about one word that can have two completely different meanings and serve completely different purposes. So when somebody says on the comment section that they're using the same language as I have been allowed to use, that is a nonsense statement, because the language which I have been using is flexible, sadly. And although I may think I'm trying to use it with precision, I can't, because the words change their meaning depending on which tribe is using them. So woke began as a term tied to social awareness and justice, but over time, particularly from the late 2010s, it's been weaponized in political discourse to fuel culture wars and caste wars. In both the UK and the US, it now serves as a shorthand for broader battles over identity, history, and progressive policies, and really nasty political discourse, often devoid of its original context. I would like to think that the original concept of woke, being aware and striving for some sort of genuine sympathy, empathy, kindness, that is retained in that word. So I go back to my original statement from last night. I don't really know what woke means, but I am aware of the history of how that word has been seized and perverted by politicians and by the media. But it is a perversion of language. It's not a clarification of language. It's a perversion of language on both sides, I'm afraid. We need words to retain their original meaning. If they don't, those words are useless. The word woke is pretty well useless as a word.